All right. Today is the 19th of January, 2011, and I'm here talking to Vance McCrumb. My name is Bill Villano, and I'm with the Veterans History Project. We're really re-interviewing Vance because we've had some trouble with your former interview. Now, you're a Vietnam vet.
Correct.
How did you get, and you were in the Air Force?
Yes.
It is Air Force, not Air Corps. Air Corps was the...
Air Corps was in your era.
In my era, right, yes. Okay.
Or maybe before your era.
No,
The tail
it
end of World War II.
It was mine.
Was
I was too young for World War II, but it was stuff that I knew. Yeah, yeah. How did you get into the Air Force? I would imagine you joined.
The Air Force, of course, is a volunteer. You volunteer to serve in the Air Force, and ever since I was tall enough to look in the sky and see an airplane, I've always had a fascination with aircraft.
Have you?
So, you know, if I was going to go in the military, it was going to be in the United States Air Force. And so I joined, before I got out of high school, did a pre-enlistment. And then after I was discharged, they allowed me to have 6 months vacation, and then I went into the Air Force in January 1963.
Uh-huh. Have you ever flown or?
No.
No,
Personally flown an aircraft? No.
No, okay.
Ride in lots of them, yes.
You what?
Ride in lots of them.
Oh, you did?
But personally piloted aircraft, no.
Mm-hmm.
I was a sentry dog handler. So I was, the closest I got to aircraft is when we were securing areas that they were in the States.
Oh, is that why you had the K on?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
When I went through basic training, I enlisted in January 16th, 1963.
Mm-hmm.
And then went through basic training, followed by 2 months of what referred to then as Air Police School, similar to the military police or shore patrol. And I believe they call it now a security place in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And upon the completion of that 2 weeks training, they took us down to the Sentry Dog School there at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, yes.
And they gave us, our graduating class, a demonstration of sentry dogs, who that particular group of guys and dogs were finishing up their training, and they were going to go be shipped to their permanent locations.
Hmm.
And they asked for volunteers, so I raised my hand. And it looked like an exciting thing to be doing, and of course, then there was an interview process. You had to go through a 2-stage interview process, and I was accepted and spent another 9 weeks there in San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base.
I was going to ask you, is Lackland? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was there for 6 months. You know,
I
2
was there
months.
for 2 years.
Yeah. And you know, then I was, after my completion of that training, I was then sent to Altus Air Force Base in Altus, Oklahoma. It's a Strategic Air Command base at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the B-52s, KC-135 refuelers, and Atlas missiles. I think they were Atlas. Those were just being phased out when I got there in the middle of 63, and the Atlas missile, and they were being phased out. And our function as a sentry dog handler was to patrol the perimeters of the key areas where the nuclear weapons were stored and where the B-52 aircraft were on standby. And so we secured the perimeter around those areas from dusk to dawn.
Mm-hmm. Who trained the dogs?
I was fortunate. When I got accepted into Sentry Dog School, I got a green dog. He hadn't been previously trained.
Oh, uh-huh.
His name was Casey, serial number 737F. Dogs had serial numbers too. Theirs were tattooed in their ear. And so I was taught by, of course, the instructors, and so I got to learn how to do it along with teaching my dog.
Oh.
The basics and, you know, the basic commands, sit down, come, heel, stay, and that sort of thing.
Was the patrolling have to do with just finding people who didn't belong there? I mean, it had nothing to do with sniffing anything or anything?
That's correct. Sentry dog duty was strictly the dogs would sense the presence of somebody trying to come through your perimeter area by their sight, sound, or their scent. They weren't trained to detect gun explosives, booby traps, or those sort of things.
What kind of a dog did you have?
German Shepherd.
A German Shepherd? Most of them are German Shepherds, I think.
All of the dogs,
Were.
majority of the dogs were German Shepherds or a derivative of.
Uh-huh.
You know, they weren't necessarily purebred.
Yeah.
In the combat trackers, in the Army, combat trackers used labs, Labrador retrievers, on the
Oh, yeah?
combat tracker function.
Huh. Labs are kind of friendly.
Yes, but they have a wonderful sense of smell,
Yeah.
and they're very, very friendly, and they can adapt to different handlers very easily,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a terrific sense of smell because their function was to track the enemy in Vietnam.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so that's what their dogs were doing. Our dogs were to detect the presence of the enemy
Mm-hmm.
and be aggressive. Labs were not aggressive, nor were they trained to be aggressive, as sentry dogs were trained to be aggressive.
Now, how long was the Century School, the K9?
8 weeks.
Yeah, 8 weeks. And then what did they do with you after that?
Then I was sent to Altus, Oklahoma. Rode a train. My dog and I rode a train to Altus, Oklahoma.
Oh, did you talk in the train too?
Yeah, Casey was in an aluminum shipping crate,
Uh-huh.
4 dogs, and then it was ventilated, and there was a place where you could put food and water
Uh-huh.
inside of the door of the shipping crate. And it was the same crates that we used when we went to Vietnam in '65. You know, the dogs were housed in those while they're in the aircraft, because they're very aggressive. You couldn't let them wander around.
Mm.
They'd gnaw on people.
Were they?
That's what they were trained to do, to be aggressive.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I don't think you'd want them roaming around in an
No.
airplane. No, my God. Where did you go to when you say this was in '65 that you went to Vietnam?
Yeah.
Where did you go? Where'd you
In the early portion of '65, they asked for volunteers to go to Vietnam.
Mhm.
Dogs were not being used in Vietnam prior to that
Why not?
by the American forces. They just weren't at that period, and they were having some difficulty securing perimeters at night.
Oh, uh-huh.
They would, of course, be manned with Marines and Army guards and or
Mhm.
Army people posted on the perimeters and in foxholes, and then the Air Force people would have standing guards around their aircraft and everything, but they were having some difficulty detecting prior to an attack the presence of the enemy. Of course, we can't smell people.
Yeah, right.
And, well, we can, but, you know,
They're kind of
if
pretty
they're bad
bad.
enough. But so they asked for volunteers in May of '65, and Mike Kleins and I, a guy went over with, we both raised our hand. We didn't know what Vietnam was. It wasn't in the news to speak of. And we didn't watch the news anyways, you know, at that age. We were too busy doing other things when we weren't on duty. And in early June, the first sergeant sent over his CQ guy to come look up Mike and myself. It was a Sunday, as a matter of fact. And we were to report to his house, his on-base house, and he was a Marine First Sergeant. His family was at church. And he took a newspaper, the Sunday newspaper, and of course we went inside, sat down, and the first sergeant was actually giving us a cup of coffee. You know, how unusual is that? And he sat down a newspaper. On the front page of the newspaper was a picture of an attack that had taken at Da Nang Air Base that blew up some aircraft. Some sappers came in, penetrated the perimeter, killed some people, and threw satchel charges on aircraft and blew up and destroyed several aircraft. And he took his finger and he went, "I'll bet that's where you SOBs are going." And of course he had no idea we were going to go to Da Nang, but our orders had been cut. And the first sergeant found out, so he called Mike and I in and tell us that our orders had been cut. My leave was canceled.
Oh,
I had
wow.
put in for a leave prior to that. And we were to report back to Lackland with our dogs, Lackland Air Force Base, the Sentry Dog School. And when we looked at the picture of, you know, the burning aircraft, of course in 1965 they weren't color, they were black and white images in the newspaper. We kind of decided that maybe we shouldn't have done this. You know?
Shouldn't have raised that
Yeah,
hand so
yeah,
quickly.
because you know, the Air Force personnel are not trained like the Army, the Marine people are, you know, in terms of combat. But of course, it was too late to say no. We didn't.
You mean the
volunteer.
Marines like the Army people?
Marines and the Army people are trained for combat, where
I
Air
see.
Force, typical Air Force security troops are not. Excuse me. And so we reported to Lackland Air Force Base, the Sentry Dog School, with our dogs. And the project was called Project Top Dog, XLV. And I think numerically that's 1945 or something like that. But anyways,
Yeah,
so
right.
we were, there was a little over 40 of us total of the volunteers throughout the United States from the Air Force bases that were accepted to go down to Lackland, and then they tested us and our dogs to see if there was a good relationship between the handler and the dog, and if the dogs were trained properly and they responded to the handler's command, and if the handler responded to what the dog was doing. And they put us through several maneuvers, and they accepted just about 90% of the folks who went down, and a couple of the guys' dogs were rejected. And so they gave them new dogs, and they had to start over from the beginning in a sense. They were experienced dogs, and they were experienced handlers.
Why were they rejected? Because they were
Not aggressive enough, or
Oh.
they were a little too timid at gunfire, the sound of gunfire. When we reported down there, they told us, oh, by the way, guys, you're going to have to detrain your dog to agitate on gunfire.
To what?
Agitate on gunfire.
Wait.
Previously, we'd always trained the dogs, and this was part of the training procedure, to bark and agitate at gunfire. The gunfire is supposed to make the dog get angry and be excited and jump around and bark. Well, that's what goes on in Vietnam around the perimeter of the air bases, is firefights on the perimeter. You don't want the dog barking and growling, giving away your position. So we had to break our dogs, retrain them in a sense to not agitate, but be alert at gunfire, and take attention to where the gunfire is coming from.
What did you do to detrain them?
Put them in a down position, kneel next to them, and then an instructor would be out in front of us with a .38 revolver with blanks, and he would fire. And the dogs would growl and bark, and we'd say no, and we'd pat them on the shoulder and rub their neck and say it's okay. Don't growl, don't bark, be nice, and talk to them in a calm voice instead of being excited voice to make the dog be excited. And it was a little difficult, and it took a while, even after I got overseas, to get him calm. But the German Shepherds are magnificent animals. They're our four-footed heroes, and they soon become acclimated to the sound of gunfire if it's around a lot. And on the perimeter, when there's firefights in the perimeters, there's a lot of gunfire. They would react to the gunfire, but they would stay silent.
What did you ask them to react to then? If they weren't going to react to the gunfire, they'd smell people out.
They would smell people. We would read the dog's reaction, how he or she worked the scent in the air. And they would react differently to seeing movement, and they would react differently by hearing something that we can't hear. And the dogs can see at night movement that we can't. And so the dogs would react a little different to each one, and you have to learn to read your dog on how he was reacting to whatever he was alerting on. And that's it.
How do they know the difference between the enemy and the non-enemy? They don't.
If someone's in an area that you're responsible for securing, they're not supposed to be there.
Oh, okay.
Now, when we were working the perimeters around the alert aircraft area at Da Nang, that's where we went to when we got into Vietnam, was Da Nang up north. The Da Nang Air Base, there was 20 of us out of the 40. And around the perimeter would be in foxholes Marines, and in some other areas there would be foxholes with Army people in the perimeters. By association, after the dogs got used to working these areas, they were used to the activity in the perimeter. The sergeant of the guard or the lieutenant going around and checking it, because at that time they couldn't chamber around in their weapons. And you can hear that sliding of the bolt back, and the movement, and you could see the guys moving from foxhole to foxhole, checking them. Of course, as they left that foxhole, got 2, 3 down, the guys would reload their, chamber rifle around in their M1s. And they got, through association, they got familiar with that. They would alert to it. They would react to the movement, but they would realize that it was normal. It's when it got in beyond that fence line, or beyond that area, towards our area, that they would react the way they were supposed to.
What would happen if they reacted to somebody, coming in, breaking the line of the perimeter What was your responsibility at that
The
point?
dog's responsibility was first to
Yeah.
alert me that it was happening, or whoever was handling in that area. At that point, we would then communicate back with the roving patrol that I have an active hot alert. I've got a penetration.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We typically didn't involve in firefights unless we were fired upon because we didn't want to give away our positions.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point in time, we would be involved with a firefight, as they come across the perimeter. But generally speaking, the reactionary teams would show up and sweep the area and engage the enemy and either repel them back or kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And those were teams that were specifically trained to back us up. They were Air Force personnel from the Air Police squadrons. At that time, it was called Air Police.
It was called what?
Air Police.
Air Police. Mm-hmm.
Which they now call Security Police, which makes more sense,
Yeah, I guess so. Did you have any situations, excuse me, any situations that were especially upsetting?
When I left the country, I had to turn my dog over to a new handler.
Oh, yeah.
And that was difficult. That was hard.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I had to pick a handler that we had to pick people that weren't previously trained because they didn't have enough trained teams to come in and relieve us.
Oh, so you picked a non-trained
Right.
handler.
Right. And he was a volunteer from the Air Police squadron. And Dutch, my dog Dutch at that time, Dutch was my second dog.
Mm-hmm.
Dutch was a good, strong dog, big dog, thick neck, very strong. So I picked a big guy, bigger than me, because he's green, and then so he was, through a period of time, it took about 6 or 7 weeks of training. And it was very difficult and confusing for the dog because I'm training my dog to boot handler. And German Shepherds and their handlers are one-man teams.
Yeah.
Unlike the labs where they can switch handlers very easily. But there was, they got accustomed to each other, and at that point I started letting him go out on our security patrols around the perimeter. We didn't go out in the jungles, or we didn't go out on combat missions around point with the Army or the Marines. We're strictly security perimeters. And I would visit them, and I would pretend I was an infiltrator, And of course he knew I would be coming, so that he could learn how Dutch could react and would react. And it was difficult for me to have my dog growl and bark at me.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a tough situation in terms of leaving him. And I didn't find out until probably 10 years ago what happened to Dutch.
What did happen to him?
He was put down by the veterinarians because he got some sort of disease. It's got a name about that long. And the handler that I had trained, Giuliani was his last name, Bob's his first name, was from New York. I don't know if it's related to the Giuliani family that's political in the New York area. But his uncle was an engineer at General Motors at Will Run plant. And through my work, I frequently get to these automotive industries and dealing with the engineers on some of their products. And I asked him, do you have any relatives? Because I knew that Bob was from the East Coast, that was in the Air Force, that was in Vietnam up north at Da Nang. And he says, yes, my cousin or nephew or something like that, I forget which. So we exchanged some emails. And he sent me a couple of pictures of him and Dutch, and then he told me that Dutch was put down in late 1967 with a disease, some blood disease that he had contacted.
While he was
and
in
I cried.
Vietnam?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I've often wondered, and it was sad,
Yeah.
but that's
How
the
old
way.
was he at the time, do you know?
Dutch was old for Vietnam. Dutch was 7.
7?
Yeah, he was an old dog relative to sentry dogs, but he was a good, healthy dog at the time, and good and strong. And our dogs got the same medical treatment we did. They had medical records. Their teeth were checked. They drew blood every month and checked their blood for any diseases, and they were groomed daily, and they were well taken care of. And if you abused your dog, you got in deep trouble. Oh yeah, you could get Article 15s, you could get court-martialed if you abused your dog, because they thought more of the dogs than they did us.
Could replace you anytime.
Yeah, that we can be replaced. The dogs are a little expensive to replace. But while we were at Lackland preparing to go overseas, the instructors told us that the success of the program will depend on your success in country while you're in Vietnam. At that point in time, the only training taking place was sentry dogs. The scout dogs that were used in World War II in Korea were no longer being used or trained. So they put a lot of emphasis on we have to be successful in order for the program to succeed and expand. A lot of that was, just bolstering us up, I think, because and we were successful everywhere we were deployed. We never had any successful penetrations. Every attempt to penetrate areas that we were involved in security was stopped.
How many wars have the canines been involved in?
Since man has been able to fight with each other.
Is that right?
Yeah. Dogs have guarded your caves in the villages.
World War II.
World War II, World War I, Korea, Vietnam, and they're used today in Afghanistan and Iraq. As a matter of fact, I just got an email yesterday about the first female handler that was killed in Afghanistan.
Oh, handler was killed?
Yeah, she was a female handler, the first ever female handler that was killed. She was an IED explosion. The dog wasn't hurt, but she was killed. She's from Texas area. We dog handlers have a network of information, regardless of the branch of the service. I communicate constantly with a guy down in South Carolina, Perry Money. He was a Marine mine and booby trap dog handler. His dog was trained to detect booby traps in mines.
Oh,
And him and I communicate weekly. Big old Marine down there.
Oh, that must be great.
Yeah. And they're early on when they were first deployed very early, they weren't trained very well. The dog teams weren't, mine and booby trap teams, and they had
Who wasn't trained very well, the dogs?
Both the handler and the dog. And they had a high kill rate. They lost a lot of handlers and dogs, and the training improved, of course, and the ratio of kills went down in terms of the handlers and dogs, being lost to explosives. And that's pretty tricky stuff.
Yeah, you mean there were a lot of them that were in Iran and
No,
Afghanistan?
this is in Vietnam.
Oh.
In Vietnam.
Okay. You say a lot of them were killed? A lot of the handlers?
By the dogs tripping an explosive device that they were trained to detect. They lost a lot of handlers, Marine handlers and dogs, because of the pressure to get these guys to the field ahead of time before they were really ready. That changed, and they got better trained. And as a result of the activity of dogs in Vietnam, is why we now have explosive detection dogs, drug detection dogs, and of course, the dog detecting the presence of people or tracking people. And there's a lot about the history of the war dogs or military working dogs that most of the general public's not aware of.
Are there any films or anything about the canines?
Yeah, there was one that came out in February '99 or 2000, War Dogs, America's Favorite Hero, America's Forgotten Heroes.
Yeah.
And it was a documentary that was put out about Vietnam war dogs. And that, I think you can search and find that on the internet. War Dogs, America's Forgotten Heroes. I've got the VHS, and I've converted some of the VHS into DVDs. So that over time, the VHS tapes will deteriorate.
Yeah, they kind of bleed into each other and all that other kind of nonsense.
And I've made several copies for students that were doing some research. And somehow or other they get my name or my address, and I've gotten them from Florida, from California, from Minnesota. They were doing some research.
Ain't the internet great?
Yeah.
Just fantastic. I'm trying to read some of the awards and citations that you have. Good conduct.
That's what I'm most proud of.
Are you?
My good conduct. Yeah.
Why?
I just thought that if I could keep my nose clean and get a good conduct award in the Air Force. The Air Force is a 4-year career, but you can't receive a good conduct medal until you've had good conduct for 3 years. You don't get one for a year.
Oh, is that right?
It's it for 3 years. Either a Buffalo to,
Oh, the Air Force is quite different than the Army.
yeah, and you have to go 3 years without getting into any major trouble, and that's really a cakewalk, you know. But if you keep your nose clean, but yeah.
Why do you think it would have been such a problem for you? Were you a cut up?
Well, I tended to get myself into trouble at times,
Oh,
you know, and I was able to avoid detection at times. So, but as I look back, during that period of time, no, it wasn't even an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know if I could qualify, or I didn't even know, in fact, that they gave you a good conduct medal.
Mm-hmm.
It's years later when I look at my records and say, you know, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah,
You
it should be.
Our unit got while in Vietnam, our unit received the Outstanding Unit Award with a V for Valor.
The K-9
Like
crew?
our unit in Vietnam was a 366 SPS K-9 section in Vietnam in '65. Our state site unit had a presidential unit citation, you know, and then you get the Good Conduct Medal and the sheriff, or the expert ribbon,
Mm-hmm.
and the Vietnam ribbon, and the stuff you get for being in country and showing up. Nothing heroic.
Mm.
Wasn't wounded. No Bronze Stars, Service Stars, or any of that kind of stuff. You know. Our dogs deserved them, but we didn't.
Mm-hmm. They didn't get them, no.
No, dogs don't get any medals.
No?
There's been a rumor, there's been an email floating around for years of a dog by the name of Brutus that received the Congressional Medal of Honor in Iraq. And of course, it's, you know, Congress is not going to authorize
That would be kind of,
to a dog,
yeah.
not making a dog not sound right, but
It would diminish
yes, it would.
It would diminish the award, yeah.
Yeah. There were some awards awarded, Purple Hearts awarded in World War II to dogs, and in the Purple Heart Association, you know, expressed some issues with that, and they were rescinded.
Huh.
You know, so that, you know, but some of the handlers that I know of or read about that had received the Bronze or the Silver Stars or Purple Hearts from the Army and the Marine guys who were really in the thick of things, they would pin their awards on their dogs,
Uh-huh.
you know, and no one's been complaining about that.
A real close relationship between handler and dog.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
I think of my dog Dutch every day,
Do you?
every day. Every day I think about Dutch.
That was your first dog?
No, it's my second
The
dog.
second
That's a
dog?
dog I had in
Yeah.
Vietnam, serial number E955. Dutch was, I had admired Dutch when I first was stationed at Altus Air Force Base. His handler's name was Ray Edgell. And I talked to the kennel master. I says, when Ray gets discharged, I would like to put my name in a hat to take over Dutch and work Dutch. I just was impressed with Dutch. He was a magnificent looking dog, and he was just as ornery as the days long.
Mm-hmm.
But him and I got along famously. You know? And we could wrestle and play, you know.
Uh-huh.
But when it come time to be aggressive and do what he's supposed to do, that's what he did.
Mm.
And so when Ray was discharged, I was able to give up Casey, my first dog, and then take over Dutch. And of course, left Dutch, you know, with a new handler in Vietnam. And when I returned to the States, I took over another dog by the name of Teddy.
Teddy?
Teddy, yeah, he's a magnificent
Oh,
animal.
yeah. What were you doing when you got back to the States? I mean,
Stateside duty, security perimeter with our dogs at night.
Where?
Altus, Oklahoma, back to
Oh.
Altus Air Force Base. And you know, we worked only at nights, both in the overseas and in the States.
Was there some reason why you needed a perimeter dog or a sentry dog?
In the States,
Yeah.
because we were securing the security areas where the alert B-52 aircraft were parked.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, those aircraft are nuclear armed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we also worked the MMS area, which was where they stored the nuclear weapons for the aircraft and the Atlas missiles. But as I said earlier, those were being phased out. The Atlas were being phased out when I was stationed at Altus in '63 and '64.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were pretty much done by the end of '63. They got those missile silos all closed up
Really?
around Altus in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And where the aircraft, the alert aircraft were, they had housing for the pilots and the crews, separate housing for them while they were on alert. And then the aircraft were there, the B-52s. And on each aircraft was a walking guard, armed guard, air police, airmen, along with a roving motorized patrol in that area. And then we patrolled the outside area of that, on the other side of the fence,
Oh.
between that and the civilian property. And we only did it at night. We didn't work it during the day because the humans can see people coming during the day,
Yeah.
whereas the dog
Yeah, right.
takes over at night. And we never had any issues there. There was a couple of crazy people that tried to penetrate the area, but the local police would catch them. We'd see them, dogs would alert on them
Mm-hmm.
as they were near the perimeter of our area.
Mm-hmm.
We'd just radio up to the headquarters there, the control office, and they'd call the local police, and the local police would come out and get them.
Now, I noticed that there's another canine person in your,
That'd be
Yeah.
Dave Heiser.
yeah.
Dave Heiser was also a sentry dog handler, but he was Army.
Oh.
And his dog's name was Major.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was he in Vietnam?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The
Yeah.
same time? Or?
No, he was after me. We were the first. There were 40 of us that went in country.
You said only 20 of them.
And there were 40 of us, and I said 20 at Da Nang, but it was 15 at Da Nang, 15 at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, which is Saigon,
Uh-huh.
and in 10 at Hoa, I think. I forget now where that other 10 were.
Okay, so there were 40 of you.
There were
all
40
told.
altogether that went in country. And once we proved that the dogs could do what they were trying to do, and they could withstand the climate, they could withstand the weather, they could withstand the noise of gunfire constantly being around, not constantly, but the opportunity for
Mhm.
gunfire, and rocket attacks. And some guys claimed their dog could hear the rocket as it was coming in.
Rockets?
You know, I never had that opportunity, thank goodness.
Yeah.
To have a rocket attack that close. But they then expanded the program, the military working dog, MWD program, to include now the scout dogs that were used in Korea in World War II. Those dogs were trained like a sentry dog to detect the presence of humans through their sight, scent, and sound. They're not trained to be aggressive.
Oh, no.
Scout dogs were not, no. There was no need for them to be, because they worked on point and a patrol behind them.
Oh, I see.
And a dog has to be able to work with that, be cognizant of the noise and activity behind him and know that it's friendly. Where a sentry dog, that stuff is a detraction. And so scout dogs were trained differently. But they also could detect the presence of gun emplacements, booby traps, tunnels. They could hear under certain conditions the wind whistling across the tripwire on a jungle trail
Oh.
that we obviously can't hear. And they're magnificent. And they
Have any of them been have any of them been used for that purpose?
they were
going-
trained for that
Going
purpose.
out and
Once
looking for booby traps and stuff?
yeah, they were trained to detect the presence. Now, what they detect when they detect the booby trap is the explosives, the smell of the explosives,
Mm-hmm.
and the smell of the person who put it there. Because our scent, especially in a humid environment like in a jungle, will stay there for days.
Oh, really?
And the dog can detect the presence of it.
Hmm.
And along with, the scent of the explosive material, the gunpowder and stuff. And the same thing with bungee pits, the small little
Yeah.
pits they would dig with the bamboo
Mhm.
pit
Yeah.
sticks in it. They could smell that stuff along, because it's not typical in the jungle, that scent that they're picking up. And they can detect the presence, and they alert their handler to it. And if you run across that War Dogs America's Forgotten Heroes, you will see about what they're talking about there.
Why weren't bloodhounds used?
Bloodhounds weren't used in the military primarily because they can't adapt to different weather.
But they can't.
Yeah, whereas a German Shepherd can adapt to just about anything. Cold weather, hot weather, humid weather. Same thing with labs, although labs would have some difficulty on some really, really cold areas because they don't have the thick coat. They have an undercoat,
Mm-hmm.
and plus their outer coat, they don't have the thick coat like a German Shepherd. And the availability of adapting to climates is what kept, the Shepherds in the labs.
Mm-hmm. You were in for 4 years.
4 years.
Excuse me. How old were you when you got out?
I joined the service when I was 19, and I was discharged when I was 23.
Mm-hmm. What'd you do with yourself at 23?
Drunk, drank,
Oh, okay.
raised 9 kinds of hell,
Uh-huh.
got married. My wife says, this is not what I want in my life, and so I straightened my life around. I no longer drink, no longer smoke, and I used to be involved in a lot of activities, sports activities, studied
Mhm.
karate for many years,
For what?
played
Sorry.
ball, studied
Oh.
karate for several years, and bowled and played ball, and we started having children. And my wife said, I'd like my children to realize that you're somebody other than who comes home late at night from activities. So,
Mhm.
so that's, yeah.
How many kids did you have?
Two.
Two?
2 children, a boy and a girl. Our daughter has
Yes.
6 children, and our son has 2.
Uh-huh.
So we spend our time traveling back and forth between Bozeman, Montana, visiting our daughter and 6 grandchildren there, in Grand Rapids area, visiting our son and his 2 children.
Oh, so you got one of them that's way out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
They used to live in Michigan. And when the economy went south, her husband's a builder. And of course, the building industry went tanked.
yeah.
And so they had vacationed out in that area years ago, and they had traveled through Bozeman, Montana. So they took off, and he went out and spent a few months there researching and seeing if there, I don't mean a few months, but a few weeks,
Mm-hmm.
seeing if it was worthwhile relocating. And so they relocated a few months or a few weeks later to Bozeman. Then, of course, the economy caught up with Bozeman, eventually. But they're doing all right.
Are they good?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your son do?
Our son is when people who know our son and who went to school with him, and they'll ask, what is Mike doing? And I'll say he's a drug pusher. But he's a pharmaceutical representative.
I used to call them detail men.
Yeah.
Way
And
back.
he married his college sweetheart, and
Mhm.
she's a teacher. And they live up in Middleville, Grand Rapids area.
Oh, they do, huh? Who's he work with? What company?
Geez, I don't know the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know the name of it.
Yeah, I had some friends who were detail men, they used to call
Yeah.
them.
They call on doctors' offices.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he has a regular geographic area that he takes care of and services. And he's on the road a lot, but he's home every night.
Mm-hmm. But he's been in that area for quite a while?
Mhm. Well, since he got out of college. And when he graduated from college, he went and worked for Steelcase.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be an outside representative for Steelcase in the furniture business. And it never materialized. And one of his old supervisors had been laid off, and he was gone for a couple of years. And he knew Mike wanted to be outdoors, be out in the field. And so we called him. He says, "Hey, I got an opening for you, altogether different field." And he says, "Well, I'm flexible. Let's interview." And he's been doing that now, I think, for 7 years.
Oh, great. Great. That's a field that's not going to tank out by
Right.
any means.
Yeah. And our daughter, she's a stay-at-home mom with 6 children, and ages from 16 to 2.5 years old.
Wow.
And she's gone back to college at MSU.
Oh,
Now,
is it?
MSU in Montana is Montana State
Montana,
University.
yes.
Yeah. And she's she got accepted in the nursing program there, so.
Had she had any training before in that
No,
area?
but that's something she wanted to do,
Oh.
other than raising 6 kids,
Yeah, that's it.
in
It's a
terms of the
full-time job.
nursing thing. And she was accepted there, and she's going to school there.
Oh, great. That's great. yeah. In the east, the U of M is University of Maryland.
Mhm. And I seen on your envelope a stamp that had University of Connecticut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, I don't mean your stamp, but your return address.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah, on your label.
Oh, all right, okay. You didn't see my car, I have a Yukon
Yeah.
plate on the
Yeah.
car. Yeah, I'm an Easterner. Still can't think of myself as a Midwesterner.
Yeah.
It's only been 35 years.
Yeah, it's hard to erase an anchor, you know,
Yeah,
your
it
lineage
really
back
is.
there.
It really is, yeah.
That's where you were raised, and
Yeah,
that's who you are, right?
yeah, even though I don't have any family to speak of there, you know, just nephews and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But, and some old friends.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them that I keep in contact with. And I don't have any real contact. You know, I don't have any reason to go and visit that
Mhm.
area.
I still communicate with the guys that I tented with. We lived in tents at the Nang.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, there was 6 of us in a tent, and the 3 of us communicate with each other frequently. And the
From
ones that
different
are-
parts of the country?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, but you know, John Weaver is in Arizona, and Mike Kleinsen's in New Mexico. And we communicate via phone or email, primarily email a lot.
Email's so convenient.
Yeah, it's a bond. It's a bond that can't go away. It's a
Mhm.
bond that it's hard for people to understand who've never been in the military.
Yeah.
And like our VBA meetings that we have, that you've attended a couple, you know, I look forward so much to those meetings because I'm back with a bunch of guys that all together, different branches of service, different personalities, different experiences, but we all have a common bond, you
Right,
know.
yeah.
And it's really something difficult for those that haven't experienced it to understand. And it's really great that you're taking on this project like this.
Well, thank you. We've been at it now for, I guess, going on 7 years.
Mhm.
And we have quite a number of them in the can, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I look forward to setting up links with your website, with your VVA website.
I can put the links up, that's not a problem.
Yeah, okay.
I do a lot of that. There's several of us that work the website,
Yeah.
but I'm responsible for the links.
Yeah, okay.
And I have already put a link on our website to the Ypsilanti
Ypsilanti Historical Society.
Yep, I've got a link there.
You do?
Yep. And when you go to VVA310.org, scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll see on the bottom of the page the links. And click on the links and it will take you to the links page.
Oh, that's great. Then we don't
And-
have to fool around with that anymore.
And I believe it's on page 2 of those links.
Uh-huh.
When we get back to my desk, I'll show you.
Okay, all right, that's great. Well, you know, I was talking with Paulo about this and just telling him that rather than you all go through this, putting these interviews on your own website, to do it through ours. Well, that's great. I'm glad.
And what I've done also is I've created links to Veterans Radio
Oh, uh-huh.
that has the interviews of last year of I think 5 or 6 of our chapter members.
Yeah.
And I
You-
created links to those links.
Yeah, now when you do that, you can view their interview.
Some of them, not all of them are webcast. Some of the earlier ones weren't, and sometimes there was some technical difficulties, as they say. So the webcast didn't get recorded, but the audio was there.
Oh, I see.
And I've got 5 or 6 of those links online, and I think 2 of them are strictly audio. But they're Veterans Radio interviews.
Yeah, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Did you have to go? Or what's-
No, he come in the room and he saw it was
Oh, okay,
occupied.
all
So.
right. Well, let's see. You were, where were you born? You were born in Lansing?
Lansing, Michigan.
Is that right? How did you get from Lansing to Milan?
Family
Did you
relocated.
join up in Lansing when you were?
I grew from the middle school, what we called junior high when I went to school.
Yeah, yeah.
They call it middle school. We moved out here. And so I grew up in this area, graduated from Lincoln High School in 1862, and enlisted in Ann Arbor.
Oh, is, you say this area, were you in Milan? Or
Willis.
Oh, Willis, okay.
Willis. If you
And
blink,
Willis kids went to Lincoln?
yes.
Oh, I
Yes.
didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Lincoln School District encompasses a pretty good geographical area.
Then you enlisted right after high school?
No, I actually enlisted prior to my graduating. Deferred enlistment.
Oh.
I had committed and signed on the dotted line, but with the recruiter and I worked out a date that I would come in and be processed.
Did you have to get your parents' permission for that?
No,
Oh, you didn't?
no, I was 18.
Oh, okay, all right.
As a matter of fact, it's kind of unusual. My parents showed absolutely zero interest in what happened in Vietnam when I came home.
Is that
It was
right?
never a topic of discussion.
Like so many
kinda
people.
hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I have a story to tell, but
That's
you know,
not
it
the
just,
point. It's
you
not
know,
the
it just,
point.
it was kind of strange. Then I had an aunt, or have an aunt, who, when she saw me after a few months after I was discharged, she wanted to know how many people I killed. And she thought that was some sort of badge of honor.
Yeah.
And I have spoken very few words to her since.
I had a friend who, after he retired, went to work at local university. I won't name. It's over in the eastern end. They used to call him Baby Killer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it really got to him.
Yeah.
That I'm happy that the veterans now are getting some of the credit
Yes.
that they should have gotten many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was very disturbing that they did not.
Yeah. It was a tough time. From about 67 on, when the war protests, which America's great for because we can protest.
Right, sure.
But the placing the blame on the individual shoulder instead of the government was the
Right.
wrong thing
Yeah.
to do.
Mhm.
And it's really tough. It was tough during that time. I have a hat from the Vietnam Dog Handlers Association that has our Vietnam Dog Handlers Association logo on it. And I was down in Ohio with my wife. She was shopping, and I was sitting down where all the old guys sit and tell war stories and lie. Actually, I read a book.
Uh-huh.
And this young college student come up, saw my hat, and started asking me questions. And his questions in terms of my activities in Vietnam were a little more sincere. And he asked about what it felt like to kill somebody, and did I kill anybody? And I said, I have no idea. Any time that I returned fire, which was infrequent, was at night, because we only worked at night. And my wife and granddaughter were coming towards us at that time, and I turned around and see that my wife, the little blonde-haired girl, my granddaughter. He says, yes. I says, I hope I didn't, because that person that exchanged gunfire with me, if he lived, he got married, he had children, and he had grandchildren, just like that, coming towards me. And he was kind of taken back by that. I didn't think that at the time, when this stuff was going on overseas when I was there. It's years later when you reflect back.
If I can refer you to one of our interviews, a fellow by the name of Jim Green, who was a POW in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to listen to the whole interview, just the last couple of minutes, and it's amazing. We asked him if he had any animosity. He was brutalized in the POW camp. And he thought, and he said, no, I don't have any animosity towards some people at all.
That would be difficult,
I know.
to be in that situation. And to be brutalized and be able to make that decision.
But he could say that now, 50 years later.
Yeah.
He could be objective about
Yeah.
it. But I'm always impressed with him. because, you know, that takes an awful lot.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Well, you got in, you got out, you did a little horsing around, and you got here. How did you get to?
I retired from AT&T about 19 years ago.
Oh yeah, what did you do at AT&T?
At that point in time, I was managing the office in Detroit, which is referred to as the long lines office, where you're
Yes. Okay.
the long distance services coming in and out of the state, going into Canada and stuff. And I was one of the supervisors that worked in that office, and that office closed through technology improvements. And they closed that office and consolidated a lot of work in different states. And then they offered me a position in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a lateral move. And I said, no. When I say I, we, the wife and I, it was a group, a joint decision in Atlanta, Georgia, and Denver, Colorado. And we gave some thoughts to Denver.
I was going to say Denver would have
but
been nice.
neither one of us wanted to go to Pittsburgh or Atlanta, Georgia. Nothing against those states, but it wasn't in our scheme of things. And my wife had been a stay-at-home mother, and she had just gone to work, back to work for the University of Michigan, and we didn't want to relocate. And so I took my retirement and drew my pension and benefits and so forth that you would get when you retired at that time. And Tom Preston, the owner of the company's office, is over here. I used to have coffee with those guys in the morning, and he'd say, come on down and see my facility. And his partner is Joe Cormos next door, who I'd like to get you to interview too. He was post World War II, he was after Korea, before Vietnam, when he went into the service. He's a mild veteran.
At my time.
Yeah, yeah. And he enlisted in the Army. And he gave me a tour of the facility. And he said, by the way, this is where your office is going to be, which is different from where I'm sitting now. And I said, well, how do you know I want to go to work for you? I don't even know anything about this business. He said, well, your wife wants you out of the house. So it's kind of a standing joke on how I ended up here, and been here ever since, and enjoy it. It's good. It's
And
a
how
good
long has
company to
that
work
been?
for. Pardon?
How long has that been?
It's been going on 19 years.
Here?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I'm 67, but I enjoy what I do. Tom and Joe are good people to work for, and my wife's not ready to retire from the university yet. She's got 20
What's she
years.
do there?
She's in an administrative side of microbiology over on North Campus, in one of the facilities over there, and she enjoys her job, and she's not ready to retire.
How long has she been there?
20 years.
20, oh, that's good.
At the university, not at that particular facility,
Yeah, but at the university, yeah. My wife retired there after 10 years, and she was fortunate. She got in just under the wire for the benefits.
Right, yeah. Kathy got in after the wire went down.
Fantastic benefits. Now they're not so high.
Yeah, you had to do the 401k thing, which she did. And we have a 401k plan here as well. So.
Yeah.
But, life has been good.
Well, that's good. That's good. And you are doing what you like and enjoy, and you're able to go out and visit your kids and grandkids.
Yeah, the wife and I, her mother is 92, and so we no longer go together to Montana. So one of us is here.
Oh, she's here? Oh.
Yeah. So we each go out there about 3 times a year each, instead of going out together. And it's just, Kathy feels more comfortable, and I'm more comfortable that way in case something happens to me, and one of us is close by.
Well, I enjoyed this time, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to tell me or ask.
No, I'm good.
But as I say, I'm pleased. I'm pleased that we finally got together.
Yeah. Tough getting our schedules together.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's tough getting you Vietnam guys in there. Really, I don't know how long it took me to get John.
Yeah, John's a very active guy.
Yes, he is. Yeah, especially with the honor guard.
Yeah, the honor guard, and they do 125, 130 funerals a year.
Yeah.
On top of the rest of the stuff that he and Jane are involved in. And his church group's taken off Friday and going to the Philippines. They go out there every couple of years, I think, and they do, they build like a schoolhouse or something.
Hmm.
And like Habitat for Humanity
Yeah,
that happens
uh-huh.
here. It's a similar thing that happens there in the Philippines.
Well, as I say, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and
Thank you, Bill.
okay, and we'll be seeing you around.
Come on out to some more.